Billionaire froze mid-stride, his hand still wrapped around the cold steel door handle. "Stop the footage," he said. The head of security blinked. "Sir?" Julian Hale didn't answer. He took a step closer to the wall of screens, his breathing shallow, eyes locked on one frame that shouldn't matter, and yet it just knocked the air from his lungs. A woman stood in his kitchen. Her back was turned. She was wiping the counter with slow, deliberate movements. Nothing remarkable about that, except for her left hand, except for the ring. Julian felt something in his chest collapse inward. Copper wire, twisted by hand. 3 uneven loops. At the center, a piece of cloudy blue glass, smoothed by time, not by tools. His vision narrowed. "That's not possible," he whispered. The security chief cleared his throat. "Sir, is there a problem with a new hire?" Julian didn't hear him. He leaned forward, palms braced against the console, staring so hard his eyes burned. He had made that ring, not commissioned it, not bought it, made it, with shaking hands, with blood on his thumb, with a desperation so raw he could still taste it if he closed his eyes. "Zoom in," Julian said. The image sharpened. The ring caught the light as the woman moved, dull copper flashing briefly, the blue glass glowing faintly like it remembered the ocean. Julian straightened slowly. "Who is she?" he asked. "Name's Marlinden," the security chief replied. "Hired last week. Background is clean. 15 years of private state work. No complaints. No red flags." Julian swallowed. "How long has she been wearing that ring?" The security chief hesitated. "Since day one, sir." Julian nodded once. "Leave." "Sir." "Now." The man left. The door closed. Julian stood alone, staring at the screens, his reflection faintly visible over the footage. A billionaire, untouchable, controlled, and unraveling over a ring worth nothing. That night, Julian didn't sleep. Not because of the usual restless spiral of numbers and deadlines, but because every time he closed his eyes, he was 17 again, sitting on the cold floor of a place he hadn't thought about in decades, holding copper wire with shaking hands while someone sat beside him and said, "It's okay. You don't have to be strong right now." Morning came quietly. Julian stood in the kitchen, pretending to scroll through emails on his tablet while listening to the soft rhythm of someone else moving through the space. Mara didn't announce herself. She never did. That had been his rule. She passed behind him, the faint scent of soap and something warm following her. Not perfume. Something clean. Safe. Julian's jaw tightened at the word that surfaced uninvited. "Safe. You changed the lighting," he said. "Yes, Mr. Hale." Her voice was calm. Even. Not apologetic. "You didn't ask." "I noticed you avoid the east windows in the morning," she replied. The glare was harsh. Julian frowned slightly. "You noticed?" "Yes." Silence stretched. Julian turned just enough to see her reflection in the dark glass of the oven door. Her hair was pulled back, practical, her posture straight, but not rigid. She didn't fidget, didn't rush. She existed like someone who wasn't afraid of being in the room. "Do you like it?" she asked. He hesitated. "It's easier." She nodded and returned to her work. Julian's gaze dropped to her hand. The ring. He cleared his throat. "That ring." She paused, not startled, not defensive, just paused. "Yes." "Why do you wear it?" Mara looked down at her hand, thumb brushing the copper unconsciously. "It reminds me how to breathe," she said simply. Julian's chest tightened. "That's an odd answer." "It's an honest one." He waited for more. She didn't offer it. That night Julian slept. Deeply. No dreams. No waking panic. Just darkness and rest. He woke with a start at sunrise, heart pounding, not from fear, but from disbelief. He hadn't slept like that since. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, breath shaky. Across the hall, he heard movement. Mara was already awake, already working, already keeping the world steady. Julian found himself watching security feeds again later that day. Not like before, not hunting, not suspicious, but attentive. She moved with intention. She adjusted things without rearranging them. She didn't erase his habits. She softened their edges. At one point, she paused near the window, fingers brushing the glass absently, the ring catching the light. Julian's throat went dry. That ring hadn't been about love. Not really. It had been about survival. He remembered the night clearly now. The storm, the shouting, the sound of a door slamming hard enough to rattle the walls. He remembered curling in on himself, heart racing, breath shallow, convinced something inside him was breaking for good. And he remembered her sitting beside him on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, steady as a lighthouse. "Do you want to hold something?" she'd asked. He'd nodded, unable to speak. She'd handed him the wire and said, "Here, make something. It helps." He'd made the ring because his hands needed something to do. He'd given it to her because she was the only solid thing in the room. Julian pressed his fingers against his sternum now, grounding himself the same way. He didn't test her with memories. He tested himself. He left a chipped blue glass tumbler on the counter the next morning. Not deliberately. Not as a trap. Just because. Mara stopped when she saw it. She picked it up, turned it slightly, then placed it beside his coffee cup instead of putting it away. Julian stared. "You didn't put it in the cabinet," he said. She glanced at it. "You reach for it sometimes." "I do." "Yes." He said nothing. Later, he changed his morning routine. He stayed in the kitchen longer, asked unnecessary questions. "You don't talk much," he said one afternoon. "You prefer quiet," she replied. "I prefer efficiency." She met his gaze. "So do I?" Something about the way she said it, without defensiveness, without fear, made his shoulders drop an inch. "You're not intimidated by me," he observed. She considered that. "No. Why?" "Because you don't use your voice to feel bigger," she said. "You use silence." Julian blinked. No one had ever put it that way. "That's not intimidation," she added. "It's protection." The word landed hard. Protection. The gala loomed closer. Julian hated these things. Hated the performance of generosity. The polished lies. The way everyone smiled like nothing could touch them. He caught Mara watching him adjust his cufflinks that evening. "You don't have to attend," he said abruptly. "I can hire temporary staff." "I'll manage," she replied. "I didn't ask you to." "I know." He frowned. "Then why?" "Because you tense when rooms get loud," she said gently. "You forget to breathe." Julian stared at her. "I can keep an eye on the exits," she continued. "And the noise." Something in his chest cracked open. The gala was a blur of voices and champagne until it wasn't. Until someone laughed too loudly. Until someone's gaze snagged on copper and blue. "Well," said a woman Julian recognized all too well, her smile sharp. "That's charming." Mara stiffened. Julian turned. The woman stepped closer. "Is that glass? Or did you raid a craft drawer?" Mara said nothing. Julian felt the room tilt. "Careful," the woman continued. "Wouldn't want to lose something so precious." She reached out. "No," Mara said, the word sharp with something Julian had never heard from her before. The ring snapped. The sound was small. The impact was not. Mara dropped to her knees. Julian moved without thinking. "Stop," he said, voice cutting through the room. He knelt beside Mara, gathering the pieces with shaking hands. The woman scoffed. "Julian, honestly." "That ring," Julian said, standing, "kept me alive." Silence slammed into the room. Mara looked up at him, eyes wide, breath caught. Julian swallowed. "And I won't let anyone touch it." The woman backed away, stunned. The guests watched, frozen. Mara stood slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. The next morning, her room was empty. Julian found a note on the counter. It wasn't long. It said she was glad he slept. If you made it this far, pause for a second. Like the video, subscribe, and leave a comment. You'll want to see what happens when he realizes why she left. Julian read the note again, and again. Then he sat down, hands shaking. Realizing emotional safety was the one thing he'd never known how to ask for, and the one thing he couldn't afford to lose. Julian read the note a third time, slower than the first two. I'm glad you slept. That was it. No signature. No explanation. No apology. Just 6 words that hit harder than any accusation ever could. He folded the paper carefully and set it down, then stared at the empty kitchen. The counters were bare. The lighting still soft. The quiet unchanged. But the space felt hollow now, like a room after someone turns off the music. He checked the guest room. Empty. Closet untouched. Bed neatly made. She hadn't taken anything he'd provided, not even the robe he'd insisted she keep, because the mornings were cold. Julian stood there longer than necessary, hands in his pockets, chest tight. She planned this, he murmured. Not maliciously, not dramatically, thoughtfully. He went to his office and sat down, fingers hovering over his keyboard. For years, this room had been his refuge, his control center, his shield. Now it felt like a cage. He pulled up her file. Mara Linden, 38. No family listed. Employment history pristine, but sparse on personal details. She'd moved cities often, never stayed long, always left on her own terms. Julian closed the file. He didn't need data. He needed courage. The car ride felt unreal, like he'd stepped out of his own life and into someone else's. He barely noticed the traffic, the familiar skyline shrinking behind him. His driver glanced at him through the rear-view mirror more than once. "Change of plans, sir?" the driver asked gently. "Yes," Julian said. "Everything." They stopped in a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. Modest buildings, trees lining the street. Nothing flashy, nothing intimidating. Julian stood on the sidewalk longer than he meant to, hands clenched, heart racing. This wasn't a boardroom. This wasn't a deal. There was nothing he could buy his way through here. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately. Mara stood there, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, hair loose around her shoulders. She looked human, relaxed in a way he'd never seen her inside his home. "Hi," she said. He exhaled sharply. "You knew I'd come." "Yes." "Why?" "Because you don't like unanswered questions," she replied. "And because you don't run from things that matter. You freeze. Then you move." That landed uncomfortably close to the truth. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. The apartment was small but warm. Plants near the windows. A kettle on the stove. Books stacked everywhere. Not staged. Lived in. Julian stayed near the door, unsure where to put himself. "You didn't take the ring," he said. She held up her hand. The copper loops were still there, bent but intact, the blue glass catching the light. "I fixed it," she said, carefully. "Why did you leave?" he asked. She met his gaze. "Because if I stayed, you would have started relying on me again." Julian frowned. "Again?" She gestured toward the couch. "Sit." He did, stiffly. Mara sat across from him, hands folded, posture calm. "You don't remember everything," she said. "But I do." Julian swallowed. "Then tell me." She studied him for a long moment. "When we were younger, you used to come find me whenever the noise got too loud. You never asked for help. You just showed up." He nodded slowly. "I remember that. You'd sit there shaking," she continued, "and I'd talk. About anything. Clouds. Stories. Dumb things. And eventually your breathing would slow." His chest tightened. "I didn't realize." "You didn't have to," she said gently. "You just needed someone steady." He looked down at his hands. "I didn't know I was using you." "You weren't," she replied immediately. "That's the point. You weren't taking. You were trusting." Julian laughed softly, bitterly. "I don't do that anymore." "I know." Silence settled between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy. "You built an entire life where no one could unbalance you," she said, "where no one could see you lose control." "That's not true," he said. "I lose control all the time." "No," she said. "You lose sleep. You lose patience. You don't lose safety." The word hit him square in the chest. You were safe with me, she said quietly, and I was safe with you, not because you promised anything, not because of romance, but because you didn't pretend. Julian looked up, eyes raw. Then why did you leave back then? She inhaled slowly. Because you stopped coming. His breath caught. You got adopted, she continued. You were happy, busy, becoming someone else. And I was proud of you. I should have. No, she said firmly. You didn't owe me anything. Not then. Not now. He shook his head. I left without saying goodbye. Yes. I never looked back. No, she agreed. But you carried the feeling. That's why the ring stayed with me. Not because I was waiting for you. Then why, he asked. Because it reminded me that even strong people need a place to rest. Julian leaned forward, elbows on his knees, facing his hands. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Let someone see me without fixing it, without managing it. Mara's voice softened. You don't have to do it all at once. Then why couldn't you stay, he asked. Because you didn't ask, she said. And because if I stayed without being asked, I become something you depended on without choosing. He looked up. I'm asking now. She didn't answer immediately. You don't need me, she said finally. Julian shook his head. No, I don't. She raised an eyebrow. I want you, he corrected. There's a difference. That broke something in her expression. Say it again, she whispered. I want you, he repeated. Not because I can't function, but because life felt quieter, better, when you were there. Mara stood abruptly and turned away. Julian rose too quickly. I didn't mean... I know what you meant, she said, voice tight. That's why this is hard. She paced the small living room, hands pressed to her temples. I've spent my life making spaces where people could breathe, she said, then leaving before they forgot how to breathe without me. Julian took a careful step toward her. I don't want you to be my oxygen. She turned. Then what do you want me to be? My place to land, he said, and I want to be yours. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. You're terrifying when you're honest, she said. He huffed a shaky laugh. I've been told I'm terrifying in general. She smiled faintly. You hide behind it. I know. She crossed her arms. If I stay, I won't disappear into your life. I won't manage you. I won't anticipate your needs without you speaking. I don't want that, he said quickly. You'll have to tell me when you're spiraling, she continued. You'll have to ask for quiet, or touch, or space. Julian swallowed. I don't know how. Learn, she said. He nodded. I will. She studied him for a long moment. Stay for tea, she said finally. Not as a promise. Just tea. Relief washed through him, so fast his knees nearly buckled. Yes, he said. Please. They sat across from each other, mugs warming their hands. Julian watched her breathe. Slow, even, grounded. How do you do that, he asked. Practice, she replied. And choosing people who don't make me earn peace. He absorbed that quietly. When he left that night, nothing was resolved, and everything had changed. He slept poorly, but honestly, he woke up without dread. He returned the next evening. And the next, they talked about small things. About books, about food, about silence. He learned to say, I need a minute. She learned to say, I'm staying. Weeks passed. One evening, Julian stood in his penthouse again, watching the city lights. It felt too big now, too empty. He texted her, Would you feel safe here? The reply came slowly. Only if you promise not to make it impressive. Julian smiled for the first time in years. If the story is resonating, make sure you're subscribed and drop a comment. Because the final part isn't about grand gestures. It's about what happens when safety becomes love. He picked up the copper wire he'd ordered earlier that day and waited. Julian didn't sleep much that night, but for the first time, he didn't fight it. He sat at the long kitchen island, the city glowing beyond the glass walls, copper wire spread out in front of him like something fragile and alive. He turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight, its resistance. He hadn't worked with anything this imprecise in years. Everything in his life obeyed rules. This didn't. He bent the wire slowly, carefully, pausing whenever his breath grew shallow. When his chest tightened, he stopped. When his hands shook, he let them. No rushing, no forcing. By morning, his fingers were sore and his eyes burned, but something had taken shape. Not a ring. Not yet. Just a circle. Uneven. Honest. He set it down and stared at it, then laughed quietly at himself. "You're still trying to control the outcome," he muttered. He left the wire where it was and went to shower. When he returned, his phone buzzed. "Mara, I made soup. Too much. You want some?" Julian stared at the message longer than necessary. "Yes," he typed, then deleted it. "I'd like that," he sent instead. Her reply came a minute later. "Okay." That was it. No emoji. No reassurance. And somehow, that felt like the most comforting answer he'd ever received. When Julian arrived at her apartment, she opened the door wearing an oversized sweater and socks, hair still damp from a shower. "You look tired," she said. "I didn't sleep," he admitted. She nodded. "Come in." He followed her into the kitchen and watched as she ladled soup into 2 bowls. "You didn't ask why," she said, setting one in front of him. "I trust the reason," he replied. Her lips curved slightly. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the quiet companionable, not heavy. "I brought something," Julian said finally. She looked up. "You don't have to bring things." "I know," he said. "This isn't a gift." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the copper wire circle. Mara's breath caught. "You don't have to wear it," he said quickly. "Or keep it, or even like it. I just—" "You stopped," she said softly. He blinked. "What?" "You stopped explaining," she said. "Thank you." She reached out, touching the wire with careful fingers. "You didn't finish it," she observed. "No," he said. "I realized I was trying to decide what it should be instead of letting it become something." She smiled at that. "May I?" she asked. He nodded. She went to a small drawer and pulled out a pair of pliers, worn and familiar looking. "You keep those?" he asked. She shrugged. "Some things are in a permanent place." She worked quietly, adjusting the wire, adding a slight twist here, smoothing an edge there. Julian watched, heart pounding, not because of anticipation, but because of how safe the moment felt. When she finished, she slid it across the table. It wasn't perfect. It was better. Mara held up her left hand, the old ring still there, repaired but visibly worn. "May I?" Julian asked. She hesitated only a second before nodding. He slid the new ring onto her other hand. She stared at it. "This one," she said slowly, "feels like now." Julian exhaled. They didn't kiss. Not yet. That night, Julian went home alone. And for the first time, he didn't feel abandoned. He felt held. Over the next weeks, they built something quietly. Mara didn't move in. Julian didn't ask her to. Instead, they created routines that didn't demand permanence. She came over some evenings, left others. Sometimes she stayed the night. Sometimes she didn't. Julian learned to ask, "Can you stay?" "Yes." Or, "I need space tonight." "Okay." Each answer carried equal weight. One evening, Julian stood in the kitchen, shoulders tight, breathing shallow. Mara noticed immediately. "What's happening?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. "Everything feels too loud." She set down the book she'd been reading. "Do you want quiet or company?" she asked. He swallowed. "Company." Quietly. She crossed the room and sat beside him, close enough that their arms touched but didn't entangle. She didn't speak. She didn't fix. She stayed. Julian's breathing slowed. Tears slid down his face without warning. "I hate this part," he whispered. "I know," she said. He leaned his forehead against her shoulder. "I don't feel weak," he said. "I feel open." She rested her head gently against his. "That's because you are." Months passed. The penthouse changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. Plants appeared near the windows. Books on the side tables. A throw blanket draped over the couch, because Mara liked to tuck her feet under it. Julian noticed he stopped watching security feeds, stopped bracing himself. One afternoon, Mara stood by the window, sunlight catching both rings. Julian watched her for a long time. "What?" she asked without turning. "You look like you belong here," he said. She turned, studying the room. "So do you?" He hesitated. "I didn't think I'd ever feel that." She crossed the space between them. "Julian," she said gently, "you don't have to earn rest." His throat tightened. "I don't know how to believe that yet." "That's okay," she replied. "You don't have to believe it. Just practice it." He nodded. That night, he asked her to move in, not with a speech, not with a ring, just a question. "Would you feel safe living here?" he asked. She considered him carefully. "Yes," she said, "as long as we promise something. Anything. If one of us stops feeling safe," she said, "we say it. Immediately. No disappearing." He nodded. "I promise." She smiled. "Then yes." The move was simple. No announcement. No headlines. Julian watched as she unpacked slowly, choosing where things went, making space instead of claiming it. "You're very intentional," he said. "So are you," she replied. "You just used to be afraid of it." He laughed softly. "Still am." One evening, they sat on the floor, backs against the couch, city lights flickering. Mara traced the new ring absent-mindedly. "I never told you why I stayed so long back then," she said. He stiffened slightly. "You don't have to." "I want to," she replied. He nodded. "You made me feel useful without making me feel responsible," she said. "That was rare. And when you left, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt finished." He turned to her. "Finished?" "Yes," she said, like a chapter that ended exactly when it needed to. His eyes filled. "I wish I'd known." She smiled softly. "You know now." He took her hand. "I don't want to build my life without you," he said. She squeezed his fingers. "Then don't." They kissed then. Not urgent. Not consuming. Steady. Like breathing. Later, as they lay together, Julian whispered, "I don't feel like I have to be impressive anymore." Mara smiled in the dark. "Good." Months later, Julian stood at the window again, watching the sunset reflect off the copper rings. "I regret the years we didn't speak," he said. Mara leaned against him. "I don't." He turned. "You don't?" "No," she said, "because you're here now, and you're ready." He considered that. "You know," he said, "I used to think love was intensity." She hummed. "And now I think it's relief," he said, "and choosing each other when nothing is on fire." She smiled. The city glowed around them. And for the first time, Julian didn't feel like he was standing alone at the top of it. He felt grounded. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes the strongest love stories aren't about being saved. They're about finally feeling safe.